You're listening to the I Love You Keep Going podcast with George Haas. For more information, please visit our website at www.mettagroup.org. That's www.mettagroup.org.
So welcome, everybody. This is I Love You Keep Going. It is Thursday, April 17th, 2025 at 7:36 p.m. Pacific Daylight Time. And thought that I would talk about a question that we get quite a bit, which is, does your attachment strategy just change on its own over time? So could you expect as you get older that your attachment strategy would just develop in a better way than it did when you were a kid? And what I like to say in a totally facetious and mean way is that at 50, you become invisible and then it doesn't matter. Which is just the representation of ageism in our culture, that tremendous focus on youthfulness. But the answer, I think, is a no. There are a few things that might alter your attachment strategy as you get older, and mainly that's whether or not you're able to form secure, functioning relationships with people. So that in the literature, anyway, preoccupied people sometimes form relationships with secure people, and in being in relationship, they tend to be able to form a more secure functioning. But it's a double-edged sword, because if the preoccupied person forms the relationship in pretend mode, then they're not actually forming an authentic attachment. They're forming a pretend attachment. And when that's discovered by the secure person, it actually can undermine the security of the secure person and pushing them more toward a preoccupied stance. Your attachment strategy is transgenerationally stable. That is to say, you are likely to have the same attachment strategy as your as your great grandmother. So 70% of people, it's that stable in family systems. You have that same attachment strategy as your great grandmother. 85% chance of having the same attachment strategy as your primary caregiver. Mostly what we do in life is look for people that have the compatible skill set so that we can form a relationship with the existing attachment strategy that we have. So secure people tend to go with secure people, dismissing people tend to go with preoccupied people, and disorganized people tend to go with disorganized people. Dismissing people can go with other dismissing people. It becomes a kind of mutual affirmation society, or I think the colloquial term is a power couple. But preoccupied people don't tend to go with other preoccupied people, because neither is exploring, and exploration and the exchange of information about exploration is so central to enlivening relationships. When there's an absence of that, the relationships get stale and people don't pursue them for too long. Lucy's arguing with me about that. The dog, in case you can't hear, because of the software. In in the non-mentalizing mode, psychic equivalence, teleological mode, and pretend mode, it's possible to form relationships primarily from that place. And so in pretend mode in particular, you don't make an authentic attachment, you pretend to make an authentic attachment, which means that it's very changeable depending on what you're doing in the moment. You can shift out of it and into something else. And so what happens when you enter into a relationship with somebody who's in pretend mode a lot of the time. When they get a better offer, they just go off to the better offer and they abandon you. And because you considered it an authentic attachment, unless you also were in pretend mode, it's quite shocking and painful that they can move on with such rapidity. I mean, it's almost head snapping, the speed that some people can move on from a relationship where they've made all of the expressions of it being something that really was significant and mattered to them. I think that's one of the reasons why I'm always talking about slow dating and this schedule of how long it is you should get to know somebody before you make any significant commitments to them, so you actually know whether they have the capacity to make that commitment or not. There's the glow period, we like to say, when you meet somebody. If they glow for you, they light up. And it is meant to get you over that rough few months of negotiating the first deals in a relationship. I know not everybody appreciates the language of deals in relationships, but when you're talking about a relationship with somebody, particularly an adult relationship, you're talking about somebody who you're enlisting to provide care for you. And you do need to know whether that person is capable of providing the care that you need before you commit too heavily to them, because it is easy during the glow period to commit to somebody in a fairly substantial way that actually isn't capable of taking care of you in the way that you need. And you wouldn't know that if you rush in too quickly. And then it's very easy to get into a mind state of they could do it if they wanted to, so that they're intentionally withholding it from me rather than really recognizing the limitations of the other person. Each of us, is this human being, which makes us all very alike. It's astonishing, I think, most of the time how alike we are. And at the same time, our conditioning is completely unique. And so we straddle this, having such similarities to each other, and then at the same time being completely unique. And so we can easily be persuaded by the way in which we're all the same, and enter into a relationship with somebody who isn't capable of responding or supporting your uniqueness, right? And then what do you do? Well, abandon your uniqueness. But then, of course, a little while later, the creeping despair grabs you by the ankles and pulls you under, and you can't do it anymore. And then you attempt to renegotiate the relationship. In the couples work I do, it's almost always one person is content in the relationship and the other person is drowning. And the content person doesn't see the need to change anything about the relationship because it completely works for them. And the drowning person is going under and can't do it anymore. Sometimes they show up and they've already drowned. They just don't know it. And they literally can't do it anymore. So I always recommend you do your couples work at the beginning of the relationship, not at the end of it, so that you set it up in a way that really can work. Christian.
Do you find that this kind of dynamic occurs when one of the partners is actually secure, or like would it not really come to that? Like, are there conditions under which there can be security in a relationship, but that's still there?
I would say that you could be insecure and negotiate a secure functioning relationship. And the main difference would be that both partners are unwilling to accept the other partner feeling like they're losing. But in the relationships, I don't typically see those relationships because they don't need counseling. People where one person is winning in the relationship and they don't mind that the other person is losing is where they get into trouble. Your caregiver is, if you take excellent care of your caregiver, then they're in excellent shape to take care of you. And if you don't take excellent care of your caregiver, they burn out after a while and then they can't take care of you. And so the quality of your care is diminished by that. And so it really is in your interest to take care of them in the way that they need, because what you get out of that is somebody then who is able to take care of you over a long period of time. Why does that matter? Because in secure functioning relationships, if you negotiate a good deal for both people and it's supportive for both people, then all of that work that you do to come to those agreements, you don't have to do anymore because you've made enduring agreements. And all of that energy that might go to stabilizing a relationship is then available to go toward your exploration. And if you pick somebody whose exploration has good synergy with your exploration, you can actually cover much more territory than you would be able to cover on your own. So it's very enriching in that way too. But in relationships where one person is cared for and the other one isn't, it's also likely that one person is exploring and the other person isn't. And so that synergy that really carries the relationship is also absent. And often in those kinds of relationships, the exploration that's shared is the secondary exploration, the gathering of time, energy, and resources. And the primary exploration is not shared. And so it becomes a dialogue around stuff. And it becomes teleological in the sense that if you give the right stuff, if you're the one who's exploring, the other person feels cared for, and if you don't give the right stuff, they don't. But it's not intimate, and it's often transactional. One of the things that happens that reinforces the stability of the attachment strategy that you have as you enter into the kinds of relationships that are like the relationships that you witnessed as a child. We learn our conflict resolution strategies by observing how the adults in the households that we grow up in manage their conflicts. And then when we go to form our own relationships and start our own households, we often mimic those attachment strategies. And so what we need to do in order to get that to work is to find somebody who's compatible with our conflict resolution strategy. You have the early phase of attachment 0 to 3, say, which really sets the foundational attachment strategy. And then you operate from that. You go off to the playground, into school, and your attachment strategy is the foundation of relationships. So even in that early age, you are drawn toward relationships that will fit to the kind of attachment conditioning that you had, because those relationships will work, and relationships that are outside of that frame don't so much. So you're drawn, and then each time you have an experience in a relationship that's in the pattern of your household, it reinforces the idea that that is how the world operates. And children are not that cognitive. They don't have a way of reflecting on the world as different from their own family systems. Then when you get to be an adult, really, and you have a cognitive capacity to reflect on what happened in your homes, you'll come to this place of, did my caregivers tell me the truth about what was happening, and did what they told me, was that meant to be helpful to me? And if it wasn't, of course, it reinforces an unwillingness to be intimate with people. So then you're looking for more transactional, role-based relationships. Now, around here, I talk almost exclusively about collaborative relationships, and I don't talk much about role-based relationships. But if you went to the bookstore and to the self-help section on relationships, 9 out of 10 books are going to be on transactional role-based relationships. Men are from Mars, women are from Venus is one, a popular title. We have the manosphere now, which is trying to adapt to feminism in a way, which is also looking for role-based relationships which are defined by certain teleological qualities. And that really never made any sense to me. I guess my early longing was to feel seen by somebody, to be known by somebody, to be acceptable because I had a mother who didn't like me. I mean, it sounds not necessarily completely catastrophic, but when you're a child, it feels pretty bad. That really don't like you and are constantly critical of who you are, wants you and expresses very explicitly how you should be different than you are. It's very painful. Tends to cause you to hide. And so really what I wanted was not to have to keep hiding because it was too exhausting. And wanted people to see me, not understanding that you have to tell people who you are because they can't intuit it. You aren't telepathic in that sense. Even if we're autistic, we're not. I don't think. So you tell people who you are, and then the people who like you come forward. The same thing is true if you present a false representation of who you are. The people who like the false representation come forward. The big problem with that, of course, is that it leads to a sense of deprivation because you're not seen, you're not known, and your authentic needs are not being met. Your pretend needs are being met. And after a while, it makes you mad and you're angry and critical. So you notice, you may have noticed quite a few, or at least I do, bickering. I think they have a name for it, the Bickersons. Wasn't there a TV show where the characters were called the Bickersons? And then you discover that you're an adult and you're living outside the family influence, and you think, oh, this is a great idea, I'll just be authentic. And then you try to just be authentic, and then you begin to understand the nature of your unique conditioning that prevents you from being able to do that because it's too frightening. And you have to overcome that fearfulness in order to do it. So the original question, of course, does your attachment strategy change much over time? It certainly can, but in order to change it, you have to be willing to tell people who you are, which means you have to be able to express authentically who you are. In some cases, people even know who they are, but a lot of times when you've been pretending for a long time, you lose track of who you are. And so you don't even know who you are. So how do you tell other people who you are when you don't even know?
That was my kind of question, George. It's like, do you know who you are? Like, do people often know who they are? But yeah, yeah, the sense of not knowing who I am in relationships.
Yeah. So then the beginning, of course, is the discovery of who you are and what your actual preferences are. In the work that we do, particularly around IPF, this actually is one of the most important things that can happen, is that somebody will actually admit that they don't know who they are, and they will admit that they can't find out. on their own. So that's the moment that they come out of pretend mode, and you can actually begin to change things. And up until then, as long as you're pretending to know who you are and know what you want and try to convince somebody of that, you don't. But the conditioning is really hard around that because it feels so threatening to have to admit that. Christian.
George, I'm curious if you see kind of a useful looseness around that, like maybe someone's idea is if they get to secure attachment, they'll know exactly who they are
Oh,
for real. But I wonder like what you think about a kind of pervading healthy doubt um, that can accompany secure attachment.
well, when I started seriously to practice meditation, I wanted to be enlightened because I thought enlightenment meant I would have no more problems. This didn't turn out to be even remotely true. And you bring up a good point in the sense that we aren't one thing. We aren't fixed. We are this collection of conditions, the conditioning, and each moment ignites different aspects of that conditioning. And so that each moment, the sense of self that arises is both completely unique to the moment that it's arising in, and at the same time, uh, a representation of the conditioning that you have. That makes sense. So one of the ways we talk about that is in organized attachment, people's conditioning is fairly stable. And so they tend to predict in reliable ways where you could actually make a calculation that if I say this to them in this way, they'll take it in. But if I say the same content in a different way, they won't take it in because of their reactivity. But disorganized people, it's such a chaotic or chaotic maybe has a negative connotation. It's such a complex setup. It's very hard to predict how somebody's going to respond to that. That's one of the hallmarks of secure functioning, that you know somebody well enough that you know how to express something to them so that they'll understand what you mean without going mad. And the self experience is insubstantial and not really what's happening. What's happening is the whole body mind conditioning, which then the self is a witness to. So that whole body mind conditioning can react in many ways, given the circumstances, given the interpretation and the meaning. Disorganized people, of course, are dissociative, so it also depends on what packet of memories that you hit in the forming of that moment. In each moment, what opens up in front of you is all of the choices you could take, all of them, every single choice that you could take in the next moment. But what happens to a lot of us, we get into these very fixed views or these limiting beliefs about who we are and what's possible for us. And so we eliminate from our own awareness a vast quantity of the possibilities in front of us. And then we tend to pick over and over again the more conditioned ones. They're more recognizable, they feel safer. And so over and over again, we choose to reinforce our responses in a way, which, enforces the attachment conditioning. We have an exercise where we touch back into the natural innocence of the child before anything bad happens, so that you can begin to get a sense of that childlike wonder for the world and for yourself that is often sequestered or hidden because of the things that happen in response to you expressing that, so that you can begin to use that kind of childlike energy in your exploration, that wonder at the way the world is, the way you are. Which is a wonderful thing, which is really a question of beginning to shift into the view that some people are safe and some environments are safe. And you can find those environments and those people, and you can be really free to explore. In the beginning, though, of course, when you admit that you can't explore because your conditioning is such, and that you always feel under pressure about having to come up with something, you can just sit in the not knowing and allow the whole body-mind process to solve the problem if you have a sense of safety and a sense of encouragement. So that's what we're really in need of. We remove the pressure of performance. We remove the idea that it has to be acceptable to whoever was in charge of us when we were little, and to just let the mind fill in what it is that's important to us, what matters to us, and then begin this process of discovery. Resilience, of course, is one of the great necessities of exploration, because most things don't turn out very well in terms of satisfying the purpose of the exploration. And if you have resilience, of course, it's just, all right, sad, next, on to the next avenue of exploration without too much lag time. And if you don't have resilience and you don't know what to do each time you come up to that experience of it not turning out exactly how you wanted or as well as you might have wanted, you're thrown into the conundrum of what to do next. And that secure modeling of taking in the data, making a decision, taking an action, seeing what happens, collecting the data, making a decision for the next action, that flow of actions is really what represents security. That expectation that things will turn out well also eases that. But when you're in an insecure mind state where you're anticipating rejection, you're anticipating things not going well, it makes it much harder to explore. When you feel or you're conditioned toward helplessness, and you feel completely unable to make the decision for what direction to go in. Each time it doesn't work out perfectly, you're thrown into this conundrum of what to do next, which can be burdensome. And if you're disorganized, of course, it isn't that you think that you'll be rejected or humiliated or just have made a bad choice. It's that you're going to be killed if you make the wrong decision. And it just puts this enormous pressure on picking the perfect thing to do. Whereas at the other end of the scale is a secure scale. It's just gathering the data, making a decision, forming an intention, taking an action, see what happens, gathering the data. Making a decision, forming an intention, taking an action, and that cycle, with the expectation that it's going to turn out well. Would it?
George, so you mentioned about insecurity, feeling helpless, and not knowing not what to do next, feeling burdensome. This is still the case with secure people. It's just that they feel burdened, but also safe at the same time.
Well, they don't. Most of the time, in these series of mundane, small things that we need to do, if it doesn't go the right way, they just make another decision based on the data to course correct, to goal correct. So that there isn't a catastrophe waiting for them. There isn't a rejection waiting for them. It isn't. They're not going to be spinning helplessly, wondering what to do next, and they're not going to be afraid of terrible consequences. So they're not inhibited that way.
Because they make decisions quickly?
Because they're confident in their decision-making process, which is underpinned by, if it doesn't go exactly as I thought, I can course correct.
So they're making decisions quickly, but with the hope that eventually it will be okay.
Yeah, that's their expectation, is that will turn out well. The dismissing person expects to be rejected. A preoccupied person can't make the first decision, because really what they're attempting to do is avoid being thrown back into not knowing what to do, which is the thing that's uncomfortable. And disorganized people are afraid of terrible consequences.
And the solution that you tell your people who are working on this is to consciously force yourself towards making any decision, because you
No,
can't let perfectionism right away.
the force is bad. I don't recommend force. What I recommend is that you remove the pressure of having to make a decision. That any decision you make will produce a results, and if it isn't the results you want, then you can just make another decision. It doesn't have to be perfect, because you're not attempting to avoid these negative outcomes doing it. And you can't know what the outcome is going to be. It's too complex. We are pathetic processors of vast amounts of data, and so we never make a decision on vast amounts of data. We make decisions on a cherry picking of data, because that's what our capacity is. Take in the data as you don't get that much. Make an intention for an action based on an outcome you're hoping for. But to guarantee an outcome is so complex. I see your hand, Christian. I'll call you. Damasio said that if you dropped a drop of red dye into a glass of water, you would have to transform all matter in the universe into computing machines and let them process for 1,000 years to be able to predict the movement of one dye molecule through an inch of water. How is it that we expect as human beings to with the little bit of data that we gather in the decision-making process, we have to reliably predict what's going to happen? We can't do it. It's just not reasonable. But you can get yourself caught up in this idea that you should be able to do that. You should be able to take an action that has a predictable outcome, and sometimes you do and sometimes you don't. So it reinforces that. Is that making sense? He did also say that your smartphone could probably reverse engineer the path of the one molecule of dye through an inch of water. And you'll notice, as human beings, we really like these narratives that explain what happened with super accuracy, right? Even though they're also made up. Christian?
George, I wonder if to what Mudit was saying, you might agree with this kind of formulation that an insecure person or a secure person might have all the same set of possibilities in front of them, and the insecure person might make a decision, might take some action and then it not work out. And instead of seeing that there's other possibilities, they kind of retreat back into the helplessness. That didn't work. Oh, I'm helpless.
Right, that's what happens.
And the secure person would just see, well, there's other possibilities here, but there is possibilities for both people. It's just one person had a different belief about them.
Mudit, you were at my house for dinner once, and I bought this big watermelon, and I carved it open, and we all sat there on the first bite. it was spoiled. And then I took it away. Very disappointing because a great big watermelon in summer is, like it's spectacular. And I just brought out a bowl of oranges, and you said something along the lines of, you pivoted rather fast from the rotten watermelon to the sliced oranges. That's what I mean. Now, it could have been a catastrophe of the ruined dessert, or it could have been a bowl of oranges.
I feel like this applies to like smaller things, yes, but I feel it's hard to talk with people where, money is involved or moving is involved, like big life decisions.
Uh,
And it's very easy to get back in the helpless state or negative state if, you move cross country and then you realize it didn't work out, and it's hard to tell yourself there are many possibilities.
well, yes, there are all of the possibilities that are then related to the moment that you're in.
It's like saying stay positive in some sense. Like,
Well, you cannot predict with any reasonable accuracy what is going to happen. That's why in Buddhism we say you make an intention for the action that you're going to take, not the action is going to produce the results that you want, because there's no way to know that. It's one of those aspects of standing on the groundless ground. How do you navigate that you can't predict the outcome of even a very good intention necessarily, and that all actions that you might take has an unseen consequence, right? How do you make plans for all of that? It just isn't what we can do as human beings. We don't have the capacity to do that. And so really what we're talking about is an ethical framework for the way that you participate in the world, and the way that you, world meaning other people, of course, the way that you participate with other people in the world, the way that you treat yourself is in an ethical framework. And then taking the actions based in this way, then addressing what happens in the outcome of all of that, which you sometimes know pretty quickly and sometimes not for a while.
people just having this belief that anything could happen.
And frequently does.
is a pretty good way to change just having this belief that what you expect will happen happens. Just having that removing that expectation is a big belief, I guess.
Dan Brown used to say, when I would grumble about the outcome of things, you live an ethical life, don't you? And I would say, well, I try to. Well, I know you. I watch you. You try to live an ethical life. And the thing you need to understand is, if you lead an ethical life, the thing that happens is the good karma. You may not want it, but it's still the good karma. And so that what you have to do is examine in what way that's represented in the good karma. So we were going to open a meditation center in December of the year before COVID hit. And if we had done that, we would have opened just at the time that the lockdown of COVID happened, and we would have been bankrupt at the end of the year. So that when it didn't open, while it was tremendously disappointing at the time, it became evident that the timing actually wasn't going to be good for it. And what actually happened was nobody lost all that money because we didn't do it. But it was not apparent at the time that was what was happening. So that's another investigation, which is quite interesting, is if I'm living an ethical life and my actions in the world are in that ethical frame, then what's happening here is the good karma. How is this the good karma, even if it's something that I didn't want? So it isn't even that it turns out the way that you want means that it's good, and it doesn't turn out the way you want, it is bad. But then you're at that moment. And of course, in this moment, this is called conditionality. In this moment, what opens up are all of the possibilities for the next moment. And the choices of the next moment are based in this moment, which was based on the moment before it. And so this series of actions that you take create this possibility for the next moment, so that you can get onto these virtuous jags and you can get onto these vicious jags, cycles, depending on your action. And you're free to pivot at any moment, depending on what you pick.
Sure. One last thing I was going to say is there's another way that I'm realizing is not put too much weight into anything. There is a free-flowing version in the meditation world that the emptiness view just sees everything as not significant. That
Right.
is another way of living that I thought is actually quite freeing, because you
Yeah.
don't really put too much meaning in anything.
Well, it
That
doesn't last very long, because the next moment has its own set of meanings.
any objective thing, or at least the non-dual, that it's not, it's you know, it's insignificant in some sense. So you're not bothered by it. It's a different way.
Right. um, it still could be very significant and not last very long. So even the significant things you can't grasp onto, can't grab, because they don't last either. So I might go in the direction of taking in as fully as you can every moment, knowing that it won't last. So you don't grab onto it. You can fully experience it. It can be quite profound and quite meaningful, and then it's gone into the next moment. And you don't grab onto anything.
Yeah, I realize the meditation has put me in a slightly the objects of the world are losing its grab, it's
Right.
losing its excitement. So I really have to push back in the oh, let me take this. It's an effort that oh, let me take this intentionally or fake it, that this is amazing, even though internally I know that's completely useless.
Because, fully engaged, there's no way to avoid the losing of everything, because everything is lost. There is only a way of avoiding having it in the first place. We can easily get into this idea that if we don't take it, if we don't engage it, we'll save ourselves the agony of losing it, but you still lose it, except you haven't really had it. And so the idea then is to push as fully as you can into each moment, each expression. Do your very best at every little thing, every mundane thing, and then don't hold on as it passes. So why don't we do a little practice? What would you like to do today?
IPF.
IPF? Yeah. Okay. So go ahead and settle in. How's that? Nice. So what's coming up? We have a level 2 starting on Friday at 10:30 a.m. Pacific time for 2 hours, the first and third Friday of the month. And that should be good. Let's see what else we got. In these uncertain times. And then in May on the 10th, we're going, oops, no, that's something else. On the 17th of May, we're going to start a level 1 class for 3 Saturdays. And then we're going to do a half-day exploration retreat on June 21st. That's an intermediate one. I like to do the intermediate and advanced mentalizing in a half-day chunk just to go over what that development is. Really what we're talking about there is the once you complete the preliminary practice of the attachment work and you want to go into the deep insight work that comes from meditation, then that's what this really is about. And then we'll have an advanced mentalizing retreat. Maybe I'll do it the week after, the 28th. Anyway, that takes us through the first half of the year. I offer the teaching freely, but I do hope that if you're resourced and you can make a donation, you will. There's a link on the website for that. Any amount is helpful, supports me and also the work Mettagroup is doing. Really appreciate your practice. It's wonderful to see you. And I hope to see you soon. Bye.